I think this is where I left off. One of the last things I was talking about was biopsychosocial, wasn't I? And then I talked about the scientific method and went through that. So let me just review for you. The scientific method is the method psychologists use to do their research. And this last part of the chapter talks about different types of research psychologists do. So we went through that whole slide on how a psychologist gathers up information. So the first thing they do is that they wonder. Remember we talked about wondering? Then they wonder and they define a problem, and then we try to choose or select a research method to do our particular research. And the research method we use should coincide with whatever our hypothesis is. And a hypothesis, once again, is like an educated guess of what we're doing. You know, you probably all have had this 3 or 4 years in a row when you took all your science classes. I'll do it again. So one type of research psychologists can do is something called naturalistic observation. This is where you observe behavior as it unfolds in natural settings. The most famous of these was when Goodall did her chimpanzee studies, where she actually lived with the chimps and became kind of part of their clan and everything. And then she'd go back every day and take notes. What naturalistic observation does is provide descriptions. It really doesn't explain anything. But remember we talked about what psychologists do, and I say we describe, we explain. Well, this types of research will do more description than anything else. If you wanted to look at the mating, nonverbal mating cues of college students, what you might do is go to a local club, a bar, a mall, or wherever you might find people where they're interested in each other. And what you would do, you just sit down in the corner somewhere and take notes about how people approach each other and their body language and things like that. Or what you can do is set up video cameras and record everything that goes on and then go back and watch the recording and try to describe what's happening. All right, that might be interesting. Some of you can all do this Saturday night. No. Could be fun. Some of you do this anyway. Don't you sit around and watch people and you just watch and you go, look at that person. And you try to describe what they're doing. That's what psychologists do, except they do it with a lot more formality to it than anything else. All right, so that's one type of experimental method we can use. Another one, don't panic when you see slides that have a lot of words on it. I'll take my time to go through this. We can also do what's called a correlational study. And psychologists use a lot of this. We don't use a lot of naturalistic observation, but we do correlational studies a lot. This is where you measure the degree of a relationship, if there's going to be any, between two events, measures or variables. How about the correlation between classroom seating and grades? Remember I talked with you last week about that I could do a study on that? Well, what I'm trying to do is define if there's a relationship between where you sit in class and what your grades are. This is a very interesting study. I've done this numerous times. It's not difficult to do. All I would do is do a seating chart. Whoops, I have one. Okay? And then at the end of the semester, write down where you sit and what type of grade that you get. Where you sit and what type of grade that you got. And then what I would do is that I do that in this class, another class. I'd probably ask a couple of colleagues of mine to do the same thing. I might call some colleagues of mine at UT at Austin and A&M and at Richland College and have them do it. And then what we can do is have a broad study basically based on where you sit. You want to know what that research is? No? Yes? But basically the research says that if you sit in the horseshoe, and I'm not insulting anybody, but if I go 1, 2, 3 seats in, 1, 2, 3 seats in, and then I go up 1, 2, 3 rows, that this group of people here usually get the highest grades. Okay? These are A's and B's. B's and C's are in the corners, okay, going up this way, and that takes up 1, 2, 3, the next 2 rows beyond that in the corners. Those are the B and C's. And usually the people who drop or do the worst are the people sitting in the back or the corners. Okay? So at the end of the semester, I'm going to look up there, okay, in the back, and say, all right, what kind of grades we got? And you people will go A, right? And prove my correlational study wrong, okay? But it's a correlational study, okay? And I've done this for numerous semesters, and that's basically what it is. So these people should leave now because they're all going to get A's and B's? No, okay? Now, I want you to look at a statement on here, down number 4. It implies relationship, not causation. All I can say is there's a relationship between the grades you get and where you sit. If you say to me, Steve, why is that? In this type of research, I can't tell you that. Because all it is a correlation. That's all it is. Now, by the way, is that 100% correlation? No. Does it mean everybody sitting in the back are going to fail or get W's? No. Everybody sitting up here will get A's and B's? No. It's just a correlation. Is that correlation a positive correlation? Number 2, in which an increase or decrease in one measure is matched by an increase or decrease in the other measure. So positive correlation means, let's do another example. Let's do, how about this one? See if we have a relationship between violent crime rates and the sale of ice cream in the city. Let's do that. Is there a correlation between the ice cream sales and violent crime rates? So a positive correlation would be as ice cream sales go up, okay, violent crime rates go up. Okay? That's a positive correlation. In the same vein, if ice cream sales go down and violent crime rates go down, that's still a positive correlation, right? Because they're both doing that. A negative correlation is in which increase in one measure is matched by a decrease in the other. So a negative correlation would mean ice cream sales go up, but violent crime rates go down. You get that? That's a negative correlation. One's going up, the other one's going down. By the way, is there a correlation between ice cream sales and violent crimes? Okay, but I didn't ask that yet, but you're on the right track, okay? So, is there a correlation between the two? Yes, there is. As ice cream sales go up, violent crime rates go up. Now, number 4 says, does that imply causation? No, it doesn't, right? There's no eating ice cream doesn't cause, okay, violent crime rates. That's there. But there might be what we call as an intervening variable. You said it as a third variable. An intervening variable means something else may be causing both of those to go up, and you said it was heat. Right, what we find as temperatures go up, what happens? People buy more ice cream, and as temperature goes up, people get more frustrated and upset and angry, and violent crime rates go up. Okay? Interesting study, but all it is correlations, and you can correlate all kinds of information that's there. All right, another method psychologists utilize is called the experimental method. This is the most powerful research tool that's undertaken to confirm or disconfirm a hypothesis. This is the only research method psychologists can use that can answer the question why. This is what gives us causation. Answer the question why. Now, the reason why this is the most powerful one is because you can control variables with this, which means I can control heat, ice cream sales. Some people get ice cream, some people don't. It's the only one where I can control the variables. So if I wanted to do a study on the relationship between sugar intake and learning, sugar intake and learning, I could do a study where I come into this class and I give this half of the class all kinds of packets of sugar, all right, 3 packets of sugar. And this part of the class I don't give any to. And then I give a lecture, and then I give you a test on the lecture I just gave you. Then I can measure the effects of sugar on learning. Is that a good study? Say no. Good, thank you. It's not a good study. Why don't you think that may not be a good study? Why isn't that a good study? Yeah, because one, we know about. Everybody knows who's getting the sugar, who isn't. So that could be a bias right there. What else?
You can't control the people.
I can't control the people. I don't know the people I gave sugar to if that's really going to have an effect on their body. Because maybe they had 3 Dr. Peppers already this morning. Maybe they tolerate sugar rather than these people over here. All right, so I have to try to figure that out and try to control that variable. What else could there be an issue with? Put on your little thinking caps. What else could there be an issue with? Wouldn't I want to what? Yeah, wouldn't I want a larger sample size? Maybe the sample size is too small. Actually, this class is not a bad sample size. Okay? It's about 80, 90 people. Okay? By the time all the late people get here. And by the way, if you were sitting in this class at UT or A&M or Tech or SMU, you'd be probably part of some experiment. Because those professors there are required to do research. Actually, their jobs, they're really hard to do more research than they are teach classes. So when you take those classes, part of your grade is going to be you have to choose one of my experiments to be part of, which could be fun. Many of you won't like that because you probably have to come at 6 o'clock at night to do some of those, okay, at different times. But you'd be part of a study that's there. Okay, but I'd have to try to control for that variable. I don't know who knew the material that I was covering. Maybe you already knew the material. Maybe the way your body processes sugar is different than somebody else. Maybe you're diabetic and I'm throwing sugar at you and you don't have time to take your insulin and I'm going to put you into a sugar high or something. I mean, there's all kinds of variables. So what I would have to try to do is control those variables. So the first thing I would do is interview you people. Tell me about your medical history. Tell me about your sugar intake. Tell me how many hours you get asleep at night. Tell me, do you know anything about this topic? Tell me. And then what I would do is I would have to try to weed you out and make sure I'm getting similar people. All right, as similar as possible in terms of your sugar intakes. I might even need to bring you in here a week ahead of time, okay, and monitor your sleep patterns and have what you're eating and everything else. You see how difficult this is before I determine was it really the effect of sugar on learning or was it something else? Because the something else is the other variables and I have to try to control those. So you know what? A lot of psychologists don't even bother doing these studies with humans. We do them with rats, little white rats, because I can control their genetic structure, what they're eating, how they're sleeping, and everything else. So a lot of these experimental studies are done with other animals because we can control the variables a little bit more. Interesting study, though. When we do this study, though, okay, we have what's called an independent variable. And the independent variable is the condition that's being investigated. In this case, the condition is the effect of sugar. All right? So who gets the sugar and who doesn't get the sugar is the independent variable as a possible cause of some change in behavior. This is the variable the researcher is going to manipulate. Let's do a study on the effect of marijuana on learning. How about that one? Okay, we'll let you people smoke or ingest or whatever else. You people don't. And then we'll do a lecture and see if that has any difference in that. Again, all kinds of variables that I need to try to control with that. But that would be called the independent variable because the researcher gives it to some people and not other people. The dependent variable is the condition, usually behavior, that's affected by the independent variable. So if I give you the sugar, let's see what the score is on your test, because I want to see how that score affects what you've learned or not. So a lot of times when you have a dependent variable, there's usually some type of score involved with it. A test, score on a test, how fast you've run, how quickly a rat runs through a maze. There's usually a score. And then you can say, this is a high score because of the sugar or not. By the way, does sugar have an effect on learning? No, there's no research that it does. Okay? Does marijuana have an effect on learning? Yes? Don't tell me it's positive, please. Yes, it does, and the effect is it reduces short-term memory. Okay, it does reduce short-term memory. When we get to the chapter on drugs, we'll talk more and more about that. Marijuana is becoming, it's legal, right, in 2 states. It's legal in many, many states for medical reasons. The whole attitude about marijuana has really changed over the years to it. In fact, it's getting to the point where people no longer say how bad it is. Now they're saying how good it is for you, which I don't get, okay? But because there are some positive reasons for it, and we'll get into that later on. Anyway, everybody got this? Experimental method? It's the only one that tells us this is the causation, that we can have causation for. Another method is called the clinical method. It's also called the case study. An in-depth study, a focus on all aspects of a single person. So if I wanted to do a study on the effects of growing up with an alcoholic father, what I would do is first I would try to find people who grew up with alcoholic fathers. I'd have to put an advertisement out, try to find those people. Those people would then come in, and then I'd sit down with those people. It's an in-depth study of one person. And what I would do is give them maybe a battery of psychological tests. I'd interview them, get their psychohistory. I might interview people around them to see what they're like. And then I do not just one person, but hopefully hundreds of people who grew up with alcoholic parents. And then I can say something like 68% of the people who grew up with alcoholic families have these personality traits, these issues, these positive parts, whatever they may be. All right, so you see those studies sometimes. And by the way, I'm going through all of this because as the semester goes on, I'll say something like, well, there was some research that indicates that. So these are all the different ways we get research that indicates that. The next one, a lot of you are familiar with, it's called a survey. It's a polling technique to answer psychological questions. Have you ever been in a mall and somebody comes up to you with a clipboard and says, can I ask you some questions? Well, the first thing they're doing is looking for demographics. That would be personal data. They're trying to figure out gender. They're looking at age, ethnicity. They might ask you questions about socioeconomic levels, where you grew up. And then what they do is they ask you then questions. And then they can say 82% of white men who are 18 to 24 who grew up Catholic, who lived in North Dallas, think this way or behave this way. Okay? Survey techniques that are there. And you can read these all the time, okay? In magazines, newspapers, and on and on. Whenever we have the next presidential election in 2 more years, you'll have all kinds of polls that go out. And what they say is, oh, based on our demographic information, we predict that someone is going to win so-and-so state. And what they do is they poll people through surveys, get demographics on these people, then make projections in terms of surveys. All right, so those are the most common types of research that psychologists use. Let's see if you were listening. For one point, the town of Indianola, Mississippi, wants to know what the community thinks about building a high-tech movie theater. Increased taxes will be used to pay for the new theater. Therefore, elected officials are mailing out a questionnaire to determine public opinion about the theater and the use of increased taxes to pay for it. Which type of research method are they using? Are they using case study, experimental, survey, or correlational method? Now remember, this is an application question, so you need to think about this. Once again, you're always looking for the key words. What would be a key word in this? Questionnaire, right. So automatically you get questionnaire in your brain, and then you say, which research study used a questionnaire? Hopefully I'm giving away the answer. But now the way you study should be done this way as well, because your tests will be multiple choice questions. When you study, you should be able to pair information up, associate information, right? Looking for a key word, which then that, boom, should be a stimulus in your brain to say, all right, which one of those research studies had a questionnaire with? I hope you study that way. All right, everybody get this? Okay, I think we had 82 to begin with. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, and let's see. 94% of you are correct. 94%, right? It's a survey study. And that's what it is. It's not a correlational study, although it kind of sounds like that. We're trying to correlate, but we're really not. We're just sending out a questionnaire to determine what percentage of people think it's accurate, right? Should we go in and attack Syria, or shouldn't we? You'll see all kinds. That's not a question. You see all kinds of surveys being done about that now. Your local congressperson, now I think where we all live, this is such an incredibly, overwhelmingly Republican congressional district that I haven't been surveyed. Have you people been surveyed? Has Ken Marchant or the other people who are our representatives, have they called you? Have someone called you up or anything like that? Have you seen any town hall meetings getting at that? Well, they should be doing that, right? Because they're supposed to be our representatives. But you'll see what surveys about this coming out in the next couple of weeks. Right? Questionnaires. All right. What we really need to look out for when we do research is something called the placebo effect. And you alluded to it before, okay? The placebo effect. An inactive substance given in the place of a drug in psychological research or by a physician who wished to treat a complaint by suggestion. So if I was doing a study on the effect of alcohol on learning, and I said, okay, what we're doing right now, I'm going to give you all some shots of vodka that you'll take. Now, some vodka, by the way, that doesn't have all that extra flavoring to it. I know a lot of you buy those vodkas with all kinds of flavoring in it. But some of them don't have any flavor whatsoever. And I can give that out. If I told someone this side of the room is getting the vodka and this side doesn't, what happens sometimes with a placebo is that some people think they're ingesting the vodka and all it is water. But because they think they're doing shots of vodka, they may begin to then act as if they're drunk. It's called a cheap drunk, by the way, okay? You've seen people do this before. Like, oh, well, I've had so much to drink. Yeah, you haven't. I didn't put any alcohol in your drink. The placebo effect. It'll destroy a study. Just absolutely destroy a study, because now what's happening? I'm not really testing the effect. I'm testing the effect of a placebo. By the way, physicians, they're not supposed to do this. Physicians are not supposed to do this. It's supposed to be unethical. But sometimes they do it. They have somebody who's a chronic complainer. Oh, my neck hurts. My shoulder hurts. This hurts. That hurts. And what they do is they say, oh, okay, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I have some samples here for you that'll reduce your pain. Here, take these home and take them. And by the way, it's going to work really well within about an hour. And it's nothing in it. It could be a sugar pill, it could be a saline pill. It's nothing really in it. And they take it and go, oh, my pain went away. That was really great. It's a placebo. They think, well, it works. Let me tell you something else. Placebos are important when you're trying to test the effectiveness of certain medications. Because what they'll do is, like if they wanted to test the effect of antidepressant drugs, let's say Prozac, what they'll do is they'll give Prozac to some people in the study. And by the way, these people do come and they do have depression. And some physicians will give some people Prozac, and other people they give them a blank pill and say, just take it. Okay? And they want to see what the difference is. And if the people taking the placebo still are depressed, but the people who took the Prozac are no longer depressed, then they know the Prozac works. Guess what? Antidepressants have a big placebo effect. Sometimes when you tell people that this is an antidepressant that's going to help you a lot, all of a sudden their depression goes away. Remember psychosocial? That's the psychological part that's there. Matter of fact, Prozac and the new antidepressants are supposed to build up in your system, and it takes generally around 30 days to build it up to get what's called a treatment dosage for it to work. Well, some people take it for 2 days and they go, oh, it works. I feel much happier. Now, is it really that potent? Does it work that quickly? Probably not. It's probably a placebo effect. My answer to that is, so what? It's helping people. Right? It's still helping people. But you're a lot cheaper if you just believed what I said rather than having to pay for those medications. But they do work that way. By the way, I also want to say that once you ingest any type of drug, the way it affects your body may be different than the person sitting next to you. So maybe some people who do take Prozac, after a week, it might help them, just because of not just the placebo effect, because of the way their brain processes different chemicals. All right, so I just finished that chapter. And at the end of every chapter, I'm going to also throw a question at you, okay? And the question would be something that I covered in the first chapter. Here's something that probably a lot of you going, what's this about? I didn't read this in the first chapter. All right, so most of your test, 85 to 90% of your test, I'll probably cover in class. But there are some things I will not cover in class that are part of your textbook. There are also some things I say in class that are not part of your textbook. And here is something that was the first thing I talked about when I passed out the syllabus. See if you remember this. I said to you, the reason why I'm going over this syllabus is because we need to talk about expectations. And expectations are important in any relationship we have. Whether we have a romantic relationship, employer-employee relationship, student-professor relationship, we all need to know about those expectations. And then I told you why. So, sharing expectations are important because of what? 1, boundaries are established. 2, each member of a relationship will understand what the other person wants. 3, roles are clarified. Or 4, all of the above. Now, again, I'm trying to teach you how to take multiple choice questions. When you see all of the above, that means what? 1, 2, and 3 better be right. However, sometimes when we read these questions, we might say something like, 2 is correct. Yeah, each member of the relationship will understand what he wants. I'm definitely sure that is. I'm not sure about 1 and 3, though. I don't know. But then if you say, you know what? Boundaries are established. Yeah, I know he said that. But I'm not sure about number 3. But if you know 2 out of the 3 are absolutely correct, go with which answer? 4, all of the above, right? Unless I put a question like number 5, 1 and 2 are correct. Number 6, 2 and 3 are correct. Those are a pain, though, aren't they, to do those? I hate those, okay? All right, so you got the answer to this one? 82 people, we got all of you. 1, 2, 3. 95% of you, right, are correct. All of them are correct. Boundaries are established, okay? Boundaries are really important in relationships, what you can do to me, what you can't do to me, right? How far I let you wander, okay? When I come down hard on you, when I don't. Those of you who are parents, boundaries with children, very important, right? Don't do that. I'll let you go only this far, but only that far and that's it. Don't you lie to me, ever. Those are boundaries that are there. Those of you who read the first chapter? Who read the first chapter? Good, 10 people. All right. You can read the chapter anytime you want, but if you read the first chapter, you now notice I didn't cover the whole chapter, did I? I can't cover the whole chapter. We'd be here for 2 semesters. Okay, so what I'm doing is picking and choosing. I'm probably going to talk about what's 85 or 90% of what's on your test, okay? But please read the chapter. I didn't cover the material on pseudopsychology. I didn't cover the material on what psychologists actually do. I didn't cover the chapter on the different types of psychology, but you never know if that may show up on your test. So please be familiar with all of the chapter. See, isn't that exciting? We actually covered a whole chapter already. So let's go to the next chapter, chapter 2. Brain, biology, and behavior. Look at that. There's a brain. That's you. That's your essence. Looks like a huge hunk of cauliflower. Okay? Did you ever think about thinking? I mean, you're thinking right now, right? How does that occur? Well, what? Is there a little man inside there that thinks for you or something? How are you you? How do all these thoughts come about? Well, it's magical, I guess. It's all there. Right? There's an incredible research studies now going on trying to determine where is consciousness? How do we think about thinking? How do we feel? And this is probably the two of the biggest frontiers we have out there. The other one is space and probably the oceans, but the brain is the other one. If you really want to get into a fascinating field, go into neuropsychology, psychology, neurobiology, because, boy, that's what the future is bringing to us. Okay, because changes are occurring here. Those of you who are taking anatomy and physiology, this is a little bit about your course. However, don't worry about it, those of you who are not taking anatomy and physiology. I'm going to make this chapter as simple as I can. I apologize to the A and P people because I'm making this, you're here, I'm doing this. I'm really kind of dummying this down, okay? So bear with me. You probably know way more than what I'll be going through in this. All right? But I want to make sure we're all starting from the beginning. So let's ask you a question. This is not for a point. This is just out of interest. In terms of the function in different brain regions, what percentage of the brain do you think you utilize? You always hear people say, oh, you only use 10% of your brain. Well, what's the rest of it doing? They're just sitting there or something, fermenting or something? What's going on? What percent of your brain do you think you use? This is not for a point. This is just an opinion question. What do you think? Now, I'll tell you what the correct answer is. There is a correct answer, but this is not for a point. All right, everybody, guess. All right. Oh, we're all over the place. 33% say 100%, 27%, 4%. I'm glad no one said none. Okay. I guess we'd be zombies or something. I don't know at that point. All right, really, the correct answer is going to be 100%. At some time or another during the course of your day, you'll be using some part of your brain. So you do use 100% of your brain. Not all of it at the same time, though. Okay? Like right now, you're not using 100% of your brain. Okay? But there are different parts of your brain that you're using. Different parts of your brain are used for math, language, used for emotions and different types of emotions. Sooner or later, you use all parts of your brain. In terms of the different regions that are there. All right, let's copy all this down. No. I just want to show you this, that if we really went into depth on the brain, that what I could do is break different part of the brain down and show you what's controlling these different parts of the brain. Hearing right here, problem solving here, organization here, planning there, attention there. Okay, motor cortex, on and on. And by the way, this is, I didn't want to absolutely confuse you, but I can probably overlay about another 400 or 500 statements up there to pinpoint different parts of the brain. Okay, and about how this controls how you think, feel, and behave. That's pretty fascinating. That's why if somebody has a tumor in a part of their brain, or they have a stroke and affects different parts of the brain, then what does that do? It affects how they think, feel, or behave. Right? So we can really pinpoint the brain very, very, very well. So in the biopsychosocial explanation of the brain, remember that? Biopsychosocial. This chapter is just going to cover the bio section. That's it. Just the bio section. What we're going to do is we're going to cover brain structure, hormones, neurochemicals. And I hope you'll begin to understand how did we get to be who we are. It wasn't all about your upbringing, about your environment. It was also about how things get processed up here. Did you ever hear someone say, oh, I don't have a brain for math? Probably quite a few of you do. Have said that. I just can't do math. I don't have a brain for math. Have you ever heard about children who are prodigies or protégés, right, who just sit down at a piano and just start playing the piano? It's like incredible, right from the beginning. Naturally born athletes? No, some people are. Okay, that way. What's going on? It's probably brain structure, how the brain develops. So in this chapter, we're just doing bio. All right, if we're going to do bio, the first thing we need to do is need to know about the building block of the brain. And those are called neurons. Building block of the brain. They're called neurons. 3 parts of a brain. One is called the dendrites, which look like tree roots. And what does it do? It receives messages from other neurons. You hear that key word? Receives messages from other neurons. So if my left arm, okay, was a dendrite, okay, here are the tree roots that extend out like that. The soma, which would be my chest, is the cell body, and it also sends messages via the axons. So here comes a message down the dendrite, hits the soma, and then comes out the axon terminal, which looks like branches linked up with other dendrites and axons to pass on information. So message, an electrical stimulation, did you hear that word, electrical stimulation, hits the dendrites, processed through the soma, and then goes out the axon. And then in your brain, you have billions of neurons. Well, I'm just talking about your brain. I'm not talking about the rest of your body, just your brain. Billions of neurons. And if we looked in your brain, what we see is that dendrites like this and axons like this. They never touch each other. They never connect. They're just like real close to each other like that. So an electrical stimulation comes down, charges down, flashes from the axon across the gap that's in between the dendrite and the axon, and then the other dendrite picks it up, an electrical stimulation comes down, fires to the next one, and so on down the line. So when I think, Steve, take your finger and wave it at everybody, what happens is that somewhere in my brain, don't ask me where, that thought starts, and then I can trace an electrical stimulation that what starts in my brain, neuron to neuron, down my spinal cord, and then over to the rest of my system to wave my finger. Happens pretty quickly, doesn't it? People say, oh, the brain is like a computer. No way. Computer is slow compared to what this happens in your brain. Really, just incredible. All right, let me show you 2 pictures. Okay, the first one here, these are the dendrites here. Okay, axon coming down, axon terminal. Here's another neuron there. There's no touching going on there. That kind of shows that they're touching, but they're really not touching. Because what winds up happening that there's a gap in between an axon here, okay, and a dendrite here. Axon is blue, dendrite is going to be the, what's that color? Like a beige color that's there. So they never touch. There's just like this, dendrite, axon, and there's a gap that's there. Now your brain has what's called electrical chemical stimulation. Your brain is full of chemicals. Absolutely full of chemicals. Actually, it kind of looks like there's a huge thunderstorm going on right now. All kinds of firing going on. What happens is that as an electrical stimulation comes down the axon, at the end of the axon, right, at the end of the axon, right here, at the end of the axon, there are all of these little sacs. They're called vesicles, synaptic vesicles. Each one of these sacs have neurochemicals in it. And there are many, many different types of neurochemicals. There's 20-something different types of neurochemicals. Let's just say this one here is serotonin. Remember serotonin? Let's say it's serotonin. Now, through a complex neurochemical reaction in which electrical stimulation comes down, and I'm not going to get into ionic changes and things like that, but what happens, the electrical stimulation comes down, pops open this vesicle and sac, and sends out serotonin into what's called the gap. Axon, electrical stimulation, pops open the chemical. Here come the chemicals. They're floating now in this gap. And then the dendrite has what's called receptor sites. See them here, here, and here? And what they do is they kind of vacuum up, they hoover up, vacuum up the chemicals. Now, each one of these receptor sites are specifically for a certain neurochemical. Only serotonin, only dopamine. Get that? The other day when I was saying to you, do you realize some of you have an awful lot of available serotonin? And people who have a lot of available serotonin are usually really happy people. Okay? People who don't have a lot of available serotonin, what did I mean by available? How much serotonin is floating around here? The more serotonin you have floating around, the higher correlation is going to be that you're going to feel happier. Now, when you go see a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist says to you, I think I want to put you on an antidepressant. Let's put you on Zoloft or Prozac, whatever it may be. They're really doing an experiment with you first to see what happens. Because they'll say, take this 60-day supply, come back and talk with me in 60 days. What we know is that some people who have chemical depressions, or when you get depressed, some people don't release enough serotonin to get it here. Other people take up the serotonin too quickly. Take it up too quickly, which what? Reduces the availability of it. So one type of antidepressant releases more serotonin to make it available, and a different type of antidepressant slows down the uptake of it to make it more available. So you go to your psychiatrist, you tell them your symptoms, and they take a psychohistory of you. They say, try this. Come back in 60 days, and you say, it didn't work. Well, then they may say, well, why didn't it work? Well, I get really sleepy. All right, well, let's change it. Let's not take it in the morning. Let's take it in the evening. Let's change your dosage. Or let me try you on a different antidepressant, because the one I put you on may be taking up too much serotonin, but your problem is you're not releasing enough. That's why it's a little experiment they're doing, because we don't know enough about the brain. By the way, they do have a test they just came out with in the last 2 years to determine the levels of neurochemicals you have in your brain. Interesting test. Extremely expensive. That's why most people don't use it. It's a lot easier to say, here, try this. Let's see what happens. It's a little bit of an experiment that goes on there as well. Every single time you ingest a drug, whether it's aspirin, Prozac, marijuana, cocaine, you name the drug, those chemicals get into your brain at this level, right here, and change your chemical makeup. Change your chemical makeup. That's why some of you feel sad, you feel happy, you don't feel anything, you have hallucinations, because what's happening, it's affecting your brain at the most primitive part of your brain to change the way what you think, feel, and behave. What do stimulants do? They speed up the messages from neuron to neuron. Right? What do depressants do? Slow down the messages that are there. So everything that you ingest affects you at this level. When you think positive thoughts or very happy thoughts, it will change the chemical availability that's there. When you're afraid of something and you get real worried, it changes the neurochemical levels. Question?
I've heard that serotonin is released when you exercise. Is that true?
Yes, it is released when you exercise. It's a feel-good. Exercise helps you feel good. Now, there's all kinds of other things that's released when you exercise, but serotonin is released. You know what? I'm going off here because I'm giving you information that's not in your textbook. It's not even in the textbooks just yet. But the part of your body that has the most available serotonin is your gut, your intestines. A lot of serotonin that's there. Fascinating studies done correlating people who have bacterial imbalances in their intestines and depression rates. Some people who have bacterial imbalances in their intestines seem to have higher degrees of depression. Interesting, isn't it? Let me tell you about a research study that they did, and you're going to laugh about this one. It's going to give another meaning to, no, I won't say it, never mind. Okay? I have to think about what I say and what I don't say. What they did with rats is they found that there were some rats were very lethargic. All right? They put them in a maze, and there was food at the end of the maze. Some rats are like, okay, I'm hungry, I'll eventually get there. They kind of walked around like they were depressed. And there are other rats that are like, oh, look, there's food. Good, let's go get it as quick as we can. Whoop, wrong way, go. And they eventually got the food. They looked like they were excited, happy rats. They measured the bacteria they had in their intestines. And what they found is that the so-called depressed rats didn't have, this type of, it's called flora? Is that what's in is that what it's called? In the intestines, where they didn't have it, but the rats who were running around really kind of happy, looking for the food, seemed to have it. This is where you can think about this and tell me how you would explain this. What they did was take some of the feces from the happy rats, right, discharged from the intestines, mixed it up with some water, and fed it to the depressed rats. Right? Fed it to the depressed rats who didn't have the energy. Those depressed rats, which changed their intestines, increased probably levels of serotonin and everything else, within a day was running the mazes just like the other rats were doing it, just by eating feces. Right? Then they took them off of their daily supply of feces, and within a day or two they were depressed rats again. There's some fascinating research going on with humans now, not only for a treatment for depression, but for those of you who may have Crohn's, those of you who have IBS or IBD, intestinal bowel syndrome or intestinal bowel disorder, that what's really going on is that there are just the wrong type of bacteria. That's why they take you to take probiotics sometimes if you have intestinal bowel syndrome or disorder like that, trying to balance off the right types of bacteria there. Maybe a treatment in the future, this is gross, maybe in the treatment in the future is find somebody who's really happy and content and go eat their... Okay, let's go to the next one. Ugh, sick, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm telling you, this is... In fact, I just got an invitation to attend a lecture, and I'm not going to go because it's in Cambridge at Harvard. And I can't go up there to go there, but I think I'm going to go to the video portion of it and watch it, and it's all about what I just talked about. It's all about what I talked about. All right, neurotransmitters. So now we want to talk more about those chemicals that are up there. Sometimes you'll hear me say the word neurotransmitters. Sometimes I'll say neurochemicals. I'm basically talking about the same thing. What are neurotransmitters? They're chemical substances secreted by a neuron that alters activity in other neurons, right? So it secretes serotonin, dopamine, or anything else, and that's taken up by the next neuron and affects how you think, feel, and behave. Change those neurochemicals, it'll change the way you think, feel, and behave. We have other types of neurotransmitters that are up there in your brain, and they're called neuropeptides. These regulate the activity of other neurons, just like serotonin does, and norepinephrine and everything else. An example of a neuropeptide, though, is enkephalins. Enkephalins are opiate, what did I just say? Opiate-like chemicals that regulate pain and stress. We also know these as endorphins. You ever hear that term, endorphins? And endorphins are chemicals released by the pituitary gland that helps reduce pain. So you have a natural chemicals, opiates, in your brain to help reduce pain. So I'm not going to do this to myself, but if I pinched myself, and as soon as I pinch myself, my brain goes, ah, that hurts. Automatically my brain releases endorphins and enkephalins, opiate-like substance, to reduce my pain reaction. Athletes, play through pain. Play through pain. How do you do that? Because your brain's going, oh my gosh, we got to survive. Dump these out. I know you women who've had babies won't believe this, but when you're in the process of delivering a child, you have more enkephalins and endorphins dumped into your system than at any other time in your life. And it still doesn't help, does it? Okay, but you really do. You have a lot of them coming in. I was going to say runner. I don't run as much. I'm a jogger now. And I'm one of these people who get up, I'm a little strange, 4:30 in the morning, so I'm out running probably by 5 every morning. Absolutely dark, right? So I'm out there running. At my age, I really probably shouldn't run. I got a knee brace on, and I go out and I start running, and my body says to me, why are we doing this? And my knee starts hurting. I'm like, gosh, why are we doing this? And my brain automatically says, we're running. We must be running from someone. We're in danger. Why else do people run? You must be in danger. We need to help him survive. Quick, start dumping some endorphins into his system so he won't feel the pain anymore and he can run away and be saved and live another day. So I'm running, and for me, after about 1.5 miles, all of a sudden I get into what's called a runner's high. I've got so much endorphins dumped into my systems, and I've been running enough years that I can probably hit it about 1.5 miles to 2 miles. And all of a sudden I'm running, and then I'm kind of like, oh, look at all the stars. This is really cool, yeah. And I get into this time distortion, okay? I'm just running along because I got drugs in my brain. They're called endorphins. And then when I'm done, no pain. I have no pain in my knees anywhere. Okay, looking at, oh, look, there's a fox running across the road. Isn't that cool? And then when I'm done, I stop. And I always do something behaviorally. Okay, when I'm done, I always go, good job, Steve. Another good run. All right, doing well. Feeling good when it's over. Why am I feeling so good? I'm high. Okay, I'm high based on what? Endorphins that are there. How do some athletes play through pain? That's why. Okay, you get this runner's high going. That's there. Stuff works. These are called enkephalins. Did you know that you also have cannabis receptor sites, natural cannabis receptor sites? Cannabis in terms of marijuana, okay, THC, that's there. Cannabis receptor sites that are there, okay, that also help reduce pain. What word did I use? Opiates, okay, they're opiate-like substances that reduce the pain that's there, naturally occurring. By the way, if you start taking too many painkillers and you start abusing painkillers, your body works in what's called homeostasis or balance. It's not going to produce enkephalins anymore because you're putting it in unnaturally. And your body's going, oh, we have plenty of it. So when you go through detox and start coming off your medication, your abuse of those drugs, okay, you may experience some really excruciating pain because your body does not naturally produce that anymore. So when you're coming off of the drugs, your body's going to do some really weird things to you. You're still with me, aren't you? All right, hanging in there? Let's talk about neural networks or some different processes of the brain. How does the brain work? Well, it works on a principle called plasticity, the capacity of the brain to change in response to experiences. Now, I'm not saying the brain is plastic like this, okay? But it can be molded like plastic, right? Plastic can be molded into different shapes and sizes. Well, so can your brain. Every time you behave something, you do it over and over and over again, your brain structure changes. Every time you think about something over and over and over and over and over again, your neurological structure changes. Every time you feel something over and over and over again, your neurological processes change. Your brain has a process called plasticity. It changes in regards to your experiences. When that person broke up with you and you felt that pain and that anger and all of those feelings, and you kept feeling it over and over and over and over again, you were realigning those neurons, and your brain was changing to make you feel depressed and sad. And then one of your friends said, no, forget about him. Come on, let's go do some different things. You can't sit there and just let your brain go back and forth and think about it and think about it and think about it. Because the more you think about it, the more your brain's going to change and it's going to line you up to be more and more depressed. So you got to do that in your brain to get you out of that and go do different things and think about different things so you don't let that brain line up. How about a behavior? You have a certain habit, don't you? And sometimes those habits are difficult to change because you've done it over and over and over and over again because your neurons have lined up. Plasticity in your brain says your brain changes based on experience, the structure in the brain. Neurogenesis is the production of new brain cells. Up until 10 or 15 years ago, we used to think, once you've killed a bunch of brain cells, that's it. Okay, you never bring them back. No, there's something called neurogenesis. And the older you get, the slower this occurs, okay? But it does occur. You can still develop new brain cells throughout your life. Another interesting term is called mirror neurons. Neurons are activated when actions are merely observed. So you don't have to do things to get your neurons to become activated. You can just watch. Athletes, right? Athletes. You're going out and practicing, let's do baseball, and you're learning to catch a ground ball. And when you were in 3rd grade, they told you to get your haunches down, get as down as far as you can, okay, get your glove down on the ground, and look at the ball as the ball comes into your mitt. Look at the balls, and you did that, those silly drills. The guy rolled the ball to you, and you caught it, you caught it, you caught it, you caught it, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. To get to the point that you don't think anymore. Those neurons what? Get lined up. So you're playing professional baseball or college baseball, the ball comes to you. You don't say, okay now, get down as far as I can now, bring my mitt out. By that time the ball is in the outfield, okay? So you do it automatically without thinking about it. What they also say is if you can make a tape of you fielding a ground ball or dancing or any other behavior and watch yourself do it perfectly, okay? Film it perfectly and then watch it over and over and over and over and over and over again, the mirror neurons get activated and they also will reinforce that. I played tennis for years. I don't play anymore because of bad knees, okay? But when I would watch a tennis match, like if I watched that tennis match tonight or I did yesterday, when I'd go out, I'd play so much better after I watched those professionals hit the ball. Why? Because I was watching them, what? Bring the racket all the way back, step in, those fluid, perfect strokes, and I'd see that over and over again. This also means maybe empathy is based on mirror neurons, how you feel for somebody else. You feel it, you watch it, you feel it, you watch it, you watch it, you feel it. This also means modeling. Remember that the other day? How powerful modeling may be as well. I'm sorry, I get excited about this stuff. I think this is fascinating. All right, let's see if you've been paying attention. The part of the nerve cell specialized for conducting information is what? Is it the axon? Is it the thyroid? The somata? The neuralemia? Or the megaphone? Which one is it? You look for your... Whoa, 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 what happened? Well, it's not accepting answers now because somehow or another my electrical charge got into this and I shut it down. Let me see if I can reset it. Hold on. Can't see. Reset. Not yet. Hold on. My system's got a problem today. Oh, well. It shouldn't be accepting answers right now. This whole thing just turned around on me here. All right, that's the correct answer. I'll give everybody credit today, all right? When I do this, I'll make sure everybody gets 1 point for this. That's the correct answer, though, the axon. Even the check mark isn't in the right spot. All right. I got a system failure going on here. All right, so that's the answer. Now, what I was going to say as you were trying to answer this question is, again, I'm teaching you how to take multiple choice questions. So when you take a multiple choice question, there usually is going to be what professors call a distractor in there. Let's throw one term in there that if the student really hasn't studied, they'll go, oh, that must be the answer. And that answer is somata. Right? Because I talked about the soma, but I never used the word somata. Okay? And see, I caught some people on that one already, but that's there. So the part of the neuron specialized for conducting information is the axon. Can't be the thyroid, haven't talked about that. The somata was the distractor. Neuralemia sounds like a good answer, right? I didn't talk about that. And megaphone is just a stupid answer. Okay? Glad no one got that one. So when you take multiple choice tests, watch out for distractors. It may, especially those of you who take a test too quickly. You take it too quickly and you go, oh, that must be the answer. You need to think these through. All right. Let's talk more about the brain and the central nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord. So messages are created here, neuron to neuron, all the way down the spinal cord, and then sent out to the peripheral nerves to tell your body, your rest of your body, what to do. Now, if you were taking anatomy and physiology, right, A and P people, you would have to memorize the 8 cervical nerves, the 8 lumbar nerves, 5 lumbar nerves, on and on and on, right? In this class, we're not doing that. All right? We're just saying, hey, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. All right? Peripheral nervous system, you see, is everything that comes out from the central nervous system. That's all you need to know. What does the peripheral nervous system do? It carries information to and from the central nervous system. Just like what I showed you on there, right? Come down, spreads it out. There are 2 distinctive parts to the peripheral nervous system. One is called the somatic system, carries messages to and from the sense organs and the skeletal muscles. The main thing to know about the somatic system is that it guides voluntary activities. Did you hear what I said? It guides voluntary activities. So that when I say, Steve, pick up your arm, what happens is the message starts in the brain, hits the somatic system to tell me to pick up my arm. I'm doing that through conscious thinking, voluntary aspects. Now, number 2 that I'm going to bring up next, when I put this up here, okay, you really need to know this and learn it now, because we will be coming back to this 2 other times during the semester. So we need to know this now. I'll wait until everybody writes this down. Did you know that we really, as humans, we really are animals out in a hostile world, still trying to survive? That's what our brain thinks. Remember I was telling you about jogging? I must be jogging because somebody's chasing me. I need to help Steve survive. We really still are animals out in a hostile environment trying to survive. And what we have buried deep in our brains is a survival mechanism. So the next overhead talks about the autonomic system, not the somatic system, but the autonomic system. The autonomic system carries messages to and from the internal organs and the glands, and it controls involuntary activities. You don't even think about this stuff, it just happens. Because your brain is trying to keep you alive. Keep you alive. It's the somatic system controls a prehistoric part of your brain that helps you to survive. And there are 2 different branches in the autonomic system. One is called the sympathetic, and the other is called the parasympathetic. If we all went back in time in Steve Link's magic time machine, and we went back 10,000 years. Now, those of you who are into historical geography or historical anthropology, I may be incorrect in terms of my years. But if we went back 10,000 years, right here in Farmers Branch, Texas, it's probably an inland sea here, but let's say we went back. What we know about early clans and tribes is that they followed the sun patterns. So the equinox is coming up. And in most cultures, there were big celebrations around is it the equinox that's coming up or the solstice? No, it's the equinox coming up, okay? Even amount of sunlight and daylight, nighttime and day and light, okay, coming up. And what we found is that there were big meetings of the clans, and people used to come together from miles around. They all used to get together and teach each other and have huge parties. So let's make believe 10,000 years ago, we all have gotten together at the meeting of the clans. And this group of people here have been gathering fruits and vegetables, and they're making us some quiches. Okay, and the people behind them went out hunting, and they killed a woolly mammoth, and they're cooking up some woolly mammoth burgers and filet of woolly mammoth. And the people in the back 2 rows have gotten these little grapes, okay, and they threw them in a couple of buckets, and they squashed them, and they made them ferment for a while, and they made us some nice Cabernet, okay, for us to drink, okay? And we're having a grand old party. Because, back then they had parties. And what did they do? They drank, they ate, and they danced, and they played music. Kind of like what we do, don't we? Okay, when we celebrate. We still drink, we dance, we have fun. They did that back then. And then out of the corner of these 2 people's eyes, they see a saber-toothed tiger, 2 of them, crawling up on us. We weren't on top of the food chain, right? We're still not on top of the food chain. Just go out in the wilderness sometime and try to survive, okay? But they see 2 saber-toothed tigers coming. They jump up and go, hooga, 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 wagga, okay? Which basically means, get the hell out of here. There are 2 saber-toothed tigers coming in. Automatically, autonomic, automatically the sympathetic part of your nervous system, an involuntary activity kicks into gear. Emergency system that prepares the body for fight or flight. When they scream and yell, your brain goes, ah, danger! And automatically you're going to gear up either to fight, grab your spear and fight, or to run. You got it? So what happens to us? This is in your textbook. You don't have to copy all this down. Automatically your pupils dilate. Right? Your pupils dilate. They go, ah! Right? They brighten up like that. You can't lose fluids. So you don't usually cry when you're stressed out or in fear. Not usually in the beginning. 2, inhibits your ability to salivate. Don't want to lose that fluid. But does what? Activates sweat glands. That's where your fluid goes. Cool you down. Increases heart rate, respiratory rates. Reduces your ability to digest food. So that woolly mammoth burger just sits in your digestive system. Becomes a Maalox moment or something like that, right? Just kind of sits there. That's why people who get stressed a lot have stomach issues or intestinal issues. Releases adrenaline. Why? Ah! I need to be energized to go do something. Sugar as well is released. Energy. Relaxes your bladder. Sometimes when some people get really excited and afraid, they tinkle a little bit. Did you ever see a child after they just learned to be toilet trained and they get excited about something? Sometimes they have little accidents. Okay? That's why. 2, it reduces your ability to eliminate, to defecate. Okay? Inhibits your ability for your genitalia to work. That makes sense, doesn't it? You're trying to fight for your life. You don't want to have a sexual response when that happens. Right? Unless you're a little strange, I guess. And reduces the ability of a man to ejaculate. This also says, though, when you get too stressed out, sexually, you're not going to perform very well, right? Things don't work as well. So automatically, I'm fighting, and my body prepares me for this. Now, all of those people who didn't have the genetic predisposition towards this probably sat there and went, wow, saber-tooth tiger. Ah! They got eaten. They're not part of the genetic pool anymore. So we're left with? A bunch of stressed out people who get stressed pretty quickly. Us, right? But we have to have this as part of our system to survive. Okay? The second part is the parasympathetic, which what? Calms everything down. So we go back to this, and what happens here? The saber-toothed tiger has eaten somebody else, not us. We fought them off. We killed them. Ah, it's over. Well, thank you. I needed to know that. That means the email system for the college isn't working. Okay? So what winds up happening is that we get stressed, and then we relax after that. But these are both involuntary. When we get to the chapter on stress, let's talk about how you can manage this involuntary reaction, and 2, how to induce the parasympathetic to help you to relax. Because stress really is one of the main psychological issues of our culture. Okay? And September 11th is coming up, and September 11th historically has increased people's arousal rates and their anxiety rates. Okay? It just has. We saw anxiety levels and anxiety disorders just up themselves, okay, after that event that was there. All right, I got 4 minutes. The brain, this big lump that's up here, only weighs about 3 pounds. That's all. The brain to weight ratio is about 1 to 60. Now, the heavier you are, that may change some of that. Your brain may be 3.1 pounds or something. Okay, but it's generally around the same. That has something that's a correlation with intelligence, this brain to weight ratio. There are 3 other animals in the world that seem to have a similar brain-to-weight ratio. One would be porpoises and dolphins, two would be chimps, monkeys, apes, and three of all animals is a crow, okay, are crows. And what we find on tests of human intelligence, what we find is that they seem to be the smartest of other animals, okay? They all have rudimentary types of languages. They can solve problems. They're able to use other tools to solve problems and impact their environment. I always knew about porpoises, dolphins, and chimps and monkeys, but I never knew about crows of all animals to do that. I just read about that. So there's something there. And as we study this chapter, we're also going to find out that it's really about advanced cerebral hemispheres, cerebrum development. This is where we think, right here, the frontal lobes. This is what really makes us different than anybody else.